Not too long ago, I was involved in a conversation on divine love. And I wasn't talking about the kind of love that is filled with the betrayal or the hurts or abandonments, the heartache, that kind of thing. I wasn't talking about love that we might believe is passive, like I'll send love and light and hope that everything works out for the best, right? I'm talking about divine love, that impulse or that urge of source energy to work through us, for us, as us. Okay, that divine love, the big love, okay, big love with a capital B. Now, divine love, part of divine love is learning to accept what is. Just accepting that there are some things that's how they are. Well, everything is how it is right now, right here in this moment. Things are how they are, and we have to accept that. Now, when we want to be a conscious co-creator in our life, which means taking part in that co-creation instead of just going along for the ride and hoping for the best, a big part of that, of conscious co-creation, is acceptance. Because we have to understand that things are how they are right now, so we know whether or not we can change them or not, or how do we move through it. That helps us to grow and to evolve, right? I'm talking spiritual evolution right there. So I had actually posted on my Facebook page just a short kind of blog piece about acceptance, learning to accept things as they are right now. Now, somebody who is spiritual AF had to go on the post and, of course, tell me that I was mistaken and that I was misleading people and going down a dangerous path, right? That's me. Anybody who knows me would be like, yeah, Deanna's going down a dangerous path again. I never did that. She was telling me that she's not about to accept an abusive person being in her life. And I was like, well, right. That's acceptance, right? Acceptance does not mean tolerating bad behavior. Acceptance does not mean allowing bad people or people who are behaving badly to be in our lives. That's not acceptance. In the case of an abusive person, acceptance might look like this person is abusive and their behavior is harming me. I have to make a choice that honors myself and not allow them in my life anymore. I have to set a boundary. That's what acceptance looks like, right? Acceptance is realizing that we can't change other people. So we might have to do something about getting them out of our lives. We have to look after ourselves. So tolerating bad behavior is actually more likely resistance. And how that might look is, like in the case of an abusive person, that might look like, oh, he's trying to change and he just had a really bad day and he hates the state that we live in. He hates our neighborhood, or the job is really hard, but he wants to change and tomorrow will be better. Oh, he was so nice this morning, That's resistance. Because we're not able to just accept that that's an abusive person and do something about that. Being in a state of resistance often is hoping, followed up with not doing anything about it, right? So we're hoping for the best. We're hoping for it to turn out, but there's no action going along with that, right? Like I might say, I really hope I get a good parking spot when I have to run errands later. And then I go looking for a really good parking spot, okay? So hope without action might just be resistance, right? If we're just hoping that the thing that's not working out will change itself, right? So now what happens is when we can accept things as they are, we open up to receiving divine assistance. When we are in a state of resistance, that puts us out of sync with our divine nature. So therefore, we're not as likely to follow any guidance that we receive, and we're not as likely to accept divine assistance. We probably won't notice it, right? If we're in a state of resistance, we're not going to notice those golden opportunities. So When we're not acting, or resistance, I'll say, resistance is us not acting on that divinity within us, which knows what to do, how to do it, and will compel us how to act on what it knows. Okay? It is only when we can accept what is, right here and now, what is, that we can move into action. And we want to move into action. That's really like our big goal right there is to be able to do something different. So we accept what is, and that allows us to be a force for change. Again, I'll have to say it 1,000 times probably. Accepting what is does not mean tolerating bad things. Okay? So accepting is what moves us forward. Now I have a funny example about acceptance. My stepdad, he bought his first house in the 1950s or something. And in the 1980s, he had to buy another house. That's when I was a kid. And he was like, back in the 50s, I'd buy a house for $5,000. This is ridiculous. How much houses are, right? In the 80s, it was, I don't know, like $25,000 for a house or something. I think that's what our house was. But anyway, he was in such a state of resistance that my family we moved into this home then. He purchased this home. And I swear, this place was falling apart. And I think I lived there just through high school. And then like a couple years later, my parents moved and my little sister moved out. But I heard that after that, the house was condemned, right? Because it was in such a horrible shape. So my dad basically settled for a crappy house that was falling apart because he couldn't accept that the housing prices had gone up, right? He just couldn't accept that. He could accept, if he could have accepted that, he might have bought a nicer home, paid a little more money, but it would have been a nice home, and then maybe they would have stayed there. I don't know. So the funny thing is that recently my husband and I were looking around at houses, and we were thinking about buying a house. And we were like, oh my gosh, houses are so expensive compared to when we bought our first home. And we were just like, that was a feeling of resistance. It was so hard to accept. Housing prices had gone up yet again. So when I talk about accepting what is, really one of the best metaphors that we can look to is accepting weather, right? We have to accept weather the way it is. We can't change the weather. Now we can change how we feel about the weather. We can, change how we can change where we live, but we can't change the weather. And I found myself lamenting over many, many summers because here in Southern California, our summers are hot and they're uncomfortable. It's not Palm Springs hot where I live. It's not Phoenix hot where I live, but it's still hot and uncomfortable, and I prefer cooler weather. But what I realized is that every summer, I started lamenting the fact that it was summer before it was even summertime. It's like, oh my God, summer's almost here. Then I would get into summertime and I would be like, I can't wait for fall to get here. I can't wait for fall to get here. I was constantly wishing away that 3-month period, right? Well, we know that time right now is flying by so fast. Why would I want to wish away that 3 months, right? When I could use that. So I decided I can resist this. I can keep resisting and complain about it. But you know what? Complaining doesn't change the weather. Complaining changes us. And complaining is a gateway to negative thinking. So, and I know I'll have to make a video on complaining probably, because I always have people say, complaining's what changes things, but complaining doesn't change anything. It's just a gateway to negative thinking. So I decided I'm going to start focusing on what I would like about summer, which it's because I want to be at peace. I want it to be at peace. I want it to be able to accept summertime as it is. So I would think about things I enjoyed about summertime that I could only enjoy in summertime. Swimming, eating fresh fruit, right? The special fruit that we get here locally that's like only here for the summer, right? I would just find the good things. Now, when we're resisting something, we're essentially focusing on how something is wrong, right? That's resistance. When we resist something, we might say, that was bad, that shouldn't have happened, that's not how things should be, this is not the good way, this is not a happy way. When we're resisting, we get stuck in the energy of that problem, right? Or that thing that we don't like. Now in our world right now, There are a lot of things happening that are really difficult to accept. There are acts of terrorism and there are natural disasters that are so difficult to accept. Now, having to accept that the price of houses is skyrocketing is way different than accepting that there was an act of terrorism in our community, right? Accepting that hundreds, maybe thousands of people died because of a natural disaster. So what happens is we might get, because of the magnitude of that sort of event, we may feel like we have to go into resistance because it's the acceptable behavior when there has been a big tragic event, right? That big event that we were going to say, that was wrong, that shouldn't have happened, that was terrible. And that is totally acceptable to feel that because they are tragic and they are terrible, and it would have been so much nicer if they hadn't happened, right? It would have been beautiful if it hadn't happened. But see, this is the thing about acceptance. Acceptance does not mean that we're in denial about something. And acceptance does not mean that we have to be okay with something. But it is what it is, right? And we have to accept that something happened. But we never have to be okay with it, ever. We don't have to be okay with it. But when we accept what is, we open ourselves up to new options. We open ourselves up to new ideas and new opportunities. See, when we're in resistance, we're going to miss those opportunities. We'll miss opportunities for healing, for growth, for evolving. We will miss that if we are in a state of resistance. Again, acceptance does not mean that we're settling. It never means that we're settling. Instead, when we accept what is, we open to be a bigger receiver of divine grace. Okay? A bigger receiver. We can receive even more good when we open and just accept what is. Because we can access that divine power within us that already knows what to do and how to do it, and it will compel us to act on what it knows. But we have to first accept what is if we want to make any changes, right? If we're resisting what is, we're stuck in what's wrong or what we believe is wrong. We're stuck there. But to be a force for change, to be a force for good, we want to stop resisting what's happening because things are just happening. It is what it is, right? Things are happening. So we want to accept what is happening, what has happened, so we can act on what has happened. Acceptance, again, does not mean we have to be okay with horrible things. Acceptance just puts us into a receptive state so we can be a force for positive change. And right now, when there's so much going on in our world, more than anything, we need to be that force for positive change. And so I hope you'll join me in doing that, right? In practicing accepting what is. Because, right now the world needs you. The world needs your light, okay? So you have a great afternoon and thank you for listening.